Hi everyone, it's me, Krista. Welcome back to my channel if you've been here before. If not, welcome for the very first time to my little art corner here on YouTube. Today we are going to be playing around with those Van Gogh watercolors that came in this month's Paletteful Pack. I do want to point out that I was incorrect in the last video. I did get a brush. It was inside the handle of this. Thank you to Claudia MH and Abnormal Arts for pointing this out to me. I greatly appreciate it. So for the first play around with these watercolors, I'm just going to paint a tree, and I am using the postcard, the Strathmore one that is 4x6. At this point, we are just starting. I am getting in the initial sketch using a mechanical pencil, and I'm also pulling in some erasers because I realized that I need my horizon line to be a little bit lower. And by a little bit, I mean a lot. And for erasing, I went between a Tombow one that has a sanded side and a rubber side, and a kneaded eraser. Kneaded eraser would have been better because with watercolor, you don't want to leave any shedded eraser goodness behind. And for once, I'm actually remembering to use some masking tape at the beginning. This is just some random unbranded masking tape. I don't know where it's from, but I'm using it. It works okay. Before applying it to paper, I usually put it on my pants a couple times, sticky side down, to help bring the adhesive level down a tiny bit. Now we're at the actual painting part. I am just laying down some cerulean blue using that Wee Mop by Silver. I'm going to start with the bigger brush and then switch to the smaller one that actually came with the Van Gogh set. At this point in the project, I am just laying down some base washes for every little part of our painting. Like I said, started with the sky, then I went to the grass, and then we'll be working on that tree. For the grass, I just mixed some sap green with Viridian. For the tree, I ended up mixing permanent red light with Chinese white. And that is just for the leaves of that tree. But don't worry, plenty of other colors will be pulled in a little bit later. We are just trying to get in some of those base layers right now. You will also see me use a paper towel a couple of times to help lift up some color while it's still wet so that I can pull it back to be a little bit lighter. And for this one, like many other paintings and drawings, I'm trying to start light and just gradually build up some deeper tones with some more colors thrown in. And for the leaves, I'm just using a stippling action, making some dots with that. To get a deeper, cooler brown color for that trunk, I am mixing Burnt Sienna and Ultramarine Deep. Those two colors together tone each other down fairly well. Now that I've got my base in, I am going in with the smaller brush, which is the one that came with the Van Gogh set, and I'm going to be adding a bunch of detail work at this point. I did like this brush that came with the set. The only complaint I have is because the piece comes off, it did sometimes fall a little bit while I was painting. It might be a good idea to use some painter's tape or masking tape just to keep it held on there while you're actually working on stuff. It slipped a little bit as I was going. And as for the Silver Wee Mop brush, the oval one, the 5319S, I had some issues with it keeping shape once it's dried. I'm usually pretty good about wiping it off and trying to mold it back into the shape it had. I also noticed that it tended to pull up the color a little bit in certain areas when I was using it. Back to the actual painting, I've been pulling in a little bit of Chinese white to help pull in some highlights, and for that shadow underneath that tree, I mixed Sap Green, Ultramarine Deep, Burnt Sienna, and a little bit of Madder Lake Deep. And you'll see when I'm pulling in the white in certain areas that I do get it a little too opaque and pigmented, so I calm it down a little bit by mixing it with my finger. You really shouldn't use your finger because of the oil in it. It can really mess up a watercolor painting. It's better to use a paper towel for that. And at this point, I'm just trying to add a little bit more depth to the leaves of the tree, and all I'm doing is pulling in some of those blues, darker browns, that deep red color, and going back and forth. I do occasionally pull back in that mop brush to help blend stuff out. Also, the further into this painting I'm going, the less water I'm actually using. I'm using enough in order to wet it, but not enough to dilute the intensity of the color at this point. I no longer want it to be super light. I want it to be more intense and solid looking at this point. I start deepening up the trunk on that tree, and I'll start doing the grass as well. A little bit of my color bled into each other into that sky. I tried covering it up with just the blue, but I did have to pull in a little bit of paper towel to pull it back up. I also used that sharp pointy tip of that Van Gogh brush to pull the paint back up to the white of the paper and then cover it again with that lighter blue. Doing these layers towards the bottom of the sky actually ended up working out quite a bit because it gave my sky area quite a bit more depth than it originally had. Now I'm going to focus on bringing some deeper shades to that grass for a while. Still pulling in sap green, madder lake deep, burnt sienna, and a little bit of ultramarine deep. And I start doing some small linear brush strokes in order to insinuate some grass blades. For this painting, I did use black very sparingly. I mostly used it in the deepest areas of that tree trunk, and I still made sure I mixed it with plenty of other colors to try to keep it from looking super duper flat. I wanted this one to be more painterly versus more graphic like a lot of the other work I do. And since I'm talking about mixing again, I did notice with these Van Gogh watercolors that they mixed really well without getting super muddy. I know there have been some watercolor brands I've tried before where when I mixed them, even if it was only 2 or 3 colors, that it would turn really icky looking and sometimes a little chalky looking. These didn't really do that. I also noticed that they layered really well, and you could get them fairly opaque if you didn't use a lot of water. Now we get back to the process of the painting. For the grass, I started pulling in some Azo Yellow Medium and some Permanent Lemon Yellow to help lighten up certain areas of the grass. And I'm going in with that tree trunk once again, pulling in Burnt Sienna, Ultramarine Deep, and I think at this point a tiny bit of black to help deepen it up even more. I also start pulling in some more of the Cerulean Blue to help break up certain areas of the leaves a little bit more. At this point, I'm trying to make it look less rounded and as though it's a little bit more individual. Basically, I'm trying to add some asymmetry and make it a little bit more imperfect so it looks more natural. And pretty soon here, I start pulling in a tiny bit of green into the sky itself, and then pulling some yellow into the leaves. I'm trying to pull some of the colors around a little bit more so that it doesn't feel as though each section is just solidly one individual color as much. It makes the whole piece flow better this way. I also start pulling in a little bit of yellow into the tree trunk and more into that grass, and a touch of red will also go into the tree trunk and grass a little bit later. Overall, I had a lot of fun doing this project. I was really impressed with the Van Gogh watercolors. Previously, I wasn't a very big fan of half-pan watercolors in general. I tended to prefer the ones that came straight out of a tube. But between this and some of the Daniel Smith ones that I got to try in a recent sketch box, that opinion is changing, and I'm looking forward to playing with these a little bit more. Also, the brush that came with them works pretty well. You can get a variety of different line weights and just a lot of different techniques. It's very versatile. The Strathmore watercolor postcards worked really well too. It held up to the amount of layers I put on here. Obviously, I had it taped down. It did warp a little bit, even with it being taped down, but I think if I put something on top of it for a little while, it'll flatten right back out. I didn't have any issues with pilling, and the watercolor stuck to the paper really well. As for the Silver Wee mop, it did its job okay. I didn't care for how it seemed to pull up the colors very quickly and easily, and I'm not a huge fan about how hard it is for it to keep its shape. Like most mop brushes, it does shed a little bit. That's pretty normal. I tend to avoid this by using a cheap eyeshadow brush, like an eyeshadow blending brush, because they do not shed nearly as much. But it did do an okay job of blending stuff. I really enjoyed this box. I had a lot of fun, and like I said earlier, I look forward to using these watercolors again. It was a great first Paletteful Packs to have. And with that, this video is pretty much over. If you liked it, please hit that like button. If you have any comments, questions, feelings, or concerns, please let me know in that comment section down below. Also let me know if you've used any of the items in this month's box and how you felt about them. If you want to see more videos like this, please feel free to subscribe. I'm going to be doing Paletteful Packs unboxings and projects once a month. Once again, thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy day or night to watch this video. I greatly appreciate it. I look forward to hearing from you guys soon, and you will definitely be hearing from me soon. Bye, everybody!